Welcome to Mysteries to Solve. Today, we will talk about the flight MH370, which disappeared out of the map and no one could solve the mystery.
On March 8, 2014, a plane carrying 239 people took off from Kuala Lumpur, bound for Beijing. It never arrived. There was no explosion, no distress call, no trace of wreckage for days. A Boeing 777, 63 meters long, simply vanished. And a decade later, with satellites, military radar, and the most advanced technology in the world, we still don't know exactly what happened. This is the story of Flight MH370. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 took off at 1:21 in the morning, local time. On board were 227 passengers from 15 different countries and 12 crew members. The flight plan was simple: 6 hours to Beijing, a route the airline had flown thousands of times before. Everything seemed normal. The pilot, Zahari Ahmed Shah, had more than 18,000 flight hours. The co-pilot, Farik Abdul Hamid, was in the final stage of his training. At 1:19, Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control handed off communication to Vietnamese airspace with a routine message: "Good night, Malaysian 370. It was the last the world ever heard from the cockpit. 2 minutes later, at 1:21, the plane's transponder, the system that tells civilian radar where an aircraft is, was switched off. No warning, no distress signal. To Vietnamese air traffic control, the plane simply vanished from their screens.
This is where the story gets strange. Even though the civilian transponder had stopped transmitting, a Malaysian military radar kept detecting an unidentified object behaving exactly like MH370, but flying in the opposite direction of its planned route, west across the Malay Peninsula, instead of continuing north toward Beijing. No one in the military reacted that night. The object disappeared from military radar around 2:22 a.m. over the Andaman Sea. For hours, the world assumed the plane had gone down somewhere along its original route over the South China Sea. Search teams from several countries combed that area and found nothing. The real clue came from an unexpected source: a satellite operated by the British company Inmarsat. Even though the plane's main communication system was off, its equipment kept automatically sending handshakes, silent technical signals, almost like a pulse, every hour, transmitting no data, just confirming the equipment was still powered on. Inmarsat engineers analyzed these pulses using a method never before applied this way. They measured the frequency shift of the signal, similar to the Doppler effect, to calculate how far the plane was from the satellite at each handshake. The final pulse was recorded at 8:18 a.m., nearly 7 hours after takeoff.
Using that data, investigators mapped out two possible arcs, one heading north over Central Asia and another heading south over the Indian Ocean. Based on fuel consumption and other factors, they concluded the plane had flown south into one of the most remote and deepest regions on the planet. What followed was the most expensive search operation in aviation history. More than $160 million invested, ships from multiple countries scanning the seafloor with sonar, and a search area that at its widest covered 120,000 square kilometers of the southern Indian Ocean, a region with depths of up to 6,000 meters and underwater terrain as rugged as mountains. In 2015, a year after the disappearance, the first physical piece turned up: a flaperon, part of the wing, found on Reunion Island, thousands of kilometers from the search zone. Analysis confirmed it belonged to MH370. Over the following years, more than 30 additional fragments washed up on the coasts of Africa and Indian Ocean islands, consistent with ocean currents flowing from the south. But the main fuselage, where the black boxes and most of the remains would be, was never found. In 2017, after spending the highest amount ever invested in an air search, Malaysia, China, and Australia officially suspended the operation.
With no black boxes and no fuselage, theories multiplied. Catastrophic mechanical failure,
a fire or decompression that incapacitated the crew while the plane kept flying on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. The problem? This doesn't explain why the transponder was manually switched off or why the plane deliberately turned west. Hijacking. Although there was no ransom demand or claim of responsibility, some investigators don't rule out outside interference, though there's no evidence anyone boarded the plane with that intent. Deliberate pilot action. This is the theory the international press has investigated most, though it's never been officially confirmed. Flight simulators found in pilot Zahari's home showed a simulated route weeks earlier that broadly matched the final calculated trajectory of the real plane. Malaysian investigators stated this wasn't conclusive on its own, and the pilot's family has publicly rejected any suggestion he had a motive to do this. Cascading electrical failure. A technical theory suggests a fire in the cargo hold, possibly linked to lithium batteries being transported as cargo, could have caused progressive failures across the plane's systems. No theory explains 100% of the evidence, and that's precisely why this case remains open in the collective imagination more than a decade later.
In 2018, a private company, Ocean Infinity, resumed the search under a no-find, no-fee agreement with the Malaysian government. They didn't find the fuselage either. In 2024, coinciding with the 10th anniversary of the disappearance, the Malaysian government announced it would consider reopening the search with new technology. For the families of the 239 people on board, MH370 isn't a mystery for entertainment. It's an open wound, missing the most basic answer any human being needs, knowing what happened to the people they loved. If this case left you with more questions than answers, the next story will unsettle you even more. The complete disappearance of an entire colony of over 100 settlers, with not a single body, no signs of struggle, and a single word carved into a tree as the only clue. Subscribe so you don't miss it.